He lit the match that started a revolution. The government that revolution created executed him for treason against it. This is the story of the founder his own revolution killed. Welcome to the Judas archives. Another file has just been unsealed. Get comfortable. We're about to open it. We are taught that revolutions are built by armies, by generals, by men born to command. But sometimes a revolution is built first by a warehouse clerk with almost no formal education who reads everything he can find and decides that his country already deserves better than what it has been given. Tonight, we step into the final years of Spanish colonial rule in the Philippines to dissect the anatomy of one of this nation's most significant and still debated betrayals, the trial and execution of Andrés Bonifacio, founder of the Katipunan, by the very revolutionary movement his uprising made possible. In 1892, Bonifacio founded the Katipunan, a secret society dedicated to Philippine independence from Spain. He became its supremo, its supreme leader, building a movement from almost nothing. Within 4 years, its membership had grown into the thousands, spread across the islands in careful secrecy. In August of 1896, as Spanish authorities closed in on the secret society, Bonifacio and his followers tore up their cedulas, the hated tax certificates that symbolized colonial submission. This moment is officially known today as the Cry of Pugad Lawin. Historians have long debated its exact date and location. It was commemorated for decades as the Cry of Balintawak before the official record was revised. But whatever it is called, this was the moment the revolution stopped being a secret and became an open war. As Supremo, Bonifacio was a brilliant organizer and a passionate voice for the cause. But on the battlefield itself, his direct military campaigns met with limited success. In the province of Cavite, a different revolutionary faction, led by a young landowner named Emilio Aguinaldo, was winning decisive victories against the Spanish. Aguinaldo's faction, known as the Magdalo, achieved what Bonifacio's own forces could not: consistent battlefield victories. His growing military success gave him something Bonifacio increasingly lacked among the fighters in Cavite province: visible, tangible, undeniable proof of leadership. The Katipunan had effectively split into two rival factions: the Magdiwang, loyal to Bonifacio as founder and supremo, and the Magdalo, loyal to Aguinaldo's proven battlefield leadership. The revolution against Spain now carried a second, quieter war, being fought entirely within its own ranks. Bonifacio traveled to Cavite himself, hoping to unify the two factions under his continued leadership as Supremo. What he found instead was a faction that respected his role as founder, but increasingly questioned whether the man who had built the movement was still the man best suited to lead it into open war. Magdalo officers proposed a solution: a formal convention to establish a single, unified revolutionary government, replacing the secret society structure entirely with something resembling an actual state. On its surface, it was a reasonable step toward organizing a fragile revolution. To Bonifacio, it looked like something else entirely. Bonifacio, as founder and supremo, ultimately agreed to attend. He believed, perhaps naively, that his position as the man who had started the entire revolution would be honored regardless of how the new government was structured. He had no way of knowing how badly that assumption would be tested. On March 22, 1897, delegates from both factions gathered at Tejeros. What was meant to unify the revolution would instead become the moment that broke it, and Bonifacio's place within it, permanently. Bonifacio himself presided over the assembly as its chairman, a gesture of the respect his position as founder still commanded. The delegates proceeded to vote for the leadership of a new revolutionary government, a government meant to finally replace the secret society structure with something resembling an actual functioning state. Aguinaldo, though absent from the hall that day, was elected president. Bonifacio was elected to a lesser position, Director of the Interior, when his qualifications for even that role were publicly and disrespectfully questioned by one of the Magdalo delegates. The founder of the entire revolution found himself humiliated in front of the very movement he had built. As chairman of the assembly, Bonifacio declared the entire election null and void, citing the irregularities and open disrespect that had marred the proceedings. Then, still burning with humiliation, he walked out, refusing to recognize the new government the convention had just created. Bonifacio attempted to establish a rival government of his own, insisting that, as founder of the Katipunan, his authority as Supremo had never actually been surrendered to Aguinaldo's new government, already fragile and desperately needing unity to survive against Spain. This looked less like a founder's rightful claim, and more like a direct threat to the revolution's survival. Aguinaldo's government, whatever its private motivations, ultimately decided that a divided revolutionary leadership could not survive against Spain's forces. An order was drafted, not for negotiation, but for the arrest of the man who had founded the entire movement they now governed. Bonifacio and his loyal followers, including his brothers, had retreated to the province of Indang, still asserting his authority as Supremo, still unaware that soldiers were already being sent to bring him in. At dawn, soldiers acting on Aguinaldo's orders arrived to arrest him, not Spanish colonizers, not foreign enemies, but fellow Filipinos, fellow revolutionaries, sent by the very government that existed because of the fire Bonifacio himself had lit. What followed was not a peaceful arrest. Bonifacio's loyal followers, unwilling to simply hand over their Supremo, resisted. In the chaos and gunfire that followed, his brother Kiriaco was killed, and Bonifacio himself was wounded. Wounded and overwhelmed, Bonifacio was captured along with his brother Procopio, the man who had founded the Katipunan, who had torn the first cedula and called an entire people to revolution, was now a prisoner of the government his own uprising had made possible. He was transported to Naik, and later to Maragondon, to face a trial that would decide the fate of the man responsible for the very revolution now judging him. Bonifacio was tried by a military court composed largely of officers loyal to Aguinaldo. He was charged with treason and sedition against a government that, only weeks earlier, had not existed at all without the revolution he had personally started. Historians have long questioned the fairness of the proceedings. The tribunal was composed of men whose loyalty belonged almost entirely to the government prosecuting him, and several witnesses have since been described by later scholars as unreliable or coerced. Whether Bonifacio ever received anything resembling a fair trial remains genuinely disputed to this day. The tribunal found Bonifacio guilty and sentenced him to death, the founder of the Katipunan. The man whose secret society had made an entire armed revolution possible had been condemned by a government born entirely from that same revolution. Aguinaldo, whatever his private feelings, initially commuted the sentence to exile rather than death. For a brief moment, it seemed the founder of the revolution might survive it. That mercy, however genuine, would not last. Under pressure from senior officers who feared Bonifacio's continued influence even in exile, Aguinaldo revoked the commutation. Whether this reflected his own true judgment or a decision made under the weight of men he could not afford to defy, remains one of the most debated questions in this entire chapter of Philippine history. On May 10, 1897, Andrés Bonifacio and his brother Procopio were led into the mountains near Maragondon to their execution. The man who had called an entire people to revolution walked his final steps, guarded by soldiers of the government his revolution had created. Historians still debate the exact manner of their deaths. Most accounts describe an execution by firing squad, though some later investigations have suggested the brothers may have died by other means entirely, a detail that remains unresolved even after more than a century of study. Whatever the exact manner, the outcome was the same. The founder of the Katipunan, the man whose vision and courage had lit the fire of Philippine independence, was buried in an unmarked grave, his exact resting place unknown for decades afterward. The revolution continued without him, eventually leading to Philippine independence from Spain, and later, a long struggle against a new colonial power entirely. Aguinaldo would go on to become the nation's first president, carrying, for the rest of his long life, the weight of the decision that had secured his path there. History, in the end, did not forget him. Andrés Bonifacio is remembered today as one of the great heroes of Philippine independence, the father of the revolution, honored with monuments, holidays, and a permanent place in the nation's memory, even though the government his uprising created was the one that ended his life. If you are sitting in the quiet tonight, having built something, only to be pushed aside once it succeeded, remember this: the mind can always find a reason to call unity more important than the person who built the cause. The heart never forgets lighting the fire and being left outside its warmth. Thank you for spending another night in the archives. If this story brought you comfort, leave a broken heart emoji below and subscribe to join our quiet community. Stay in the shadows. See you next time for the next dark stories. You are not alone. Goodbye.